Welcome to the final day of Career Bootcamp 2023. This morning's session is titled Finding Balance. Please note this session will be offered in English and French simultaneously. To view the French session, please return to the menu and select the French agenda. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I am located is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabeg. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement and is directly adjacent to the Haldimand Treaty Territory. Career Bootcamp is the largest conference in the GC, and the only goal is to support you in your career journey. As we move through today's session, please share your questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote for questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. As with all Fin sessions, this session will be recorded, so you can go back and check out the recordings and the insights at a later date. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Hudson to get us started this morning.
Thank you so much, Haley, and good morning, everybody. I welcome you to this session on Finding Balance. I also wanted to acknowledge my land of which I'm situated on. I'm currently in Ottawa in the land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. And my name's Hudson. I'm currently a Policy and Strategy Program Officer from the Service Canada, and I'll be your moderator today. And before we go forward, we do have a couple of polling questions that we would like your engagement on. So if you could take a couple of seconds to send me your responses, that would be great. And so for this session, we're going to explore how to identify what your priorities are and find out which actions will yield the best results when it comes to managing and tending to your priorities, and how to set healthy boundaries while working virtually or physically from anywhere. And with that, it is with great pleasure to introduce you to our panelists for this session, Sadita Roy Chaudhry and Melissa Valencia. So first up, we got Sadita, who is currently a senior advisor at the Employment, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Division of the Human Resources Branch at the CRA. And before joining the public sector, Sadita has held several leadership positions in the hospitality industry. She has a strong passion in providing excellent service and enjoys reading, traveling, and trying out new recipes with various local foods. And we also have Melissa Valencia here with us today. She has been a public servant for nearly 10 years and is currently a senior program officer working in the client experience and community enablement area within the Chief Service Officer Director, also at the CRA. Beyond that, Melissa is the co-chair of her branch's Diversity and Inclusive Network, as well as a Safe Spaces lead for the Anti-Racism Ambassadors Network. So we're going to share the results of the polling questions that you engaged in right now really quick before we jump into the actual interview questions. All right, so now we're going to jump into some of the preset questions that we have prepared. And the first one is going to go to Sadita. So as some of us may already know, that finding balance or defining balance or boundaries starts with knowing your priorities. So how do you know what your priorities are, Sadita?
Thank you, Hudson. And I'm really happy to see in the poll questions where the no is exceeding the yes in terms of the amount of hours that you're working compared to what your schedule is. So that's really great to see. And I wonder if we've all sort of focused on our priorities the last couple of years with the pandemic and then shifted that. But that's fantastic to see. I must say that's not always a result I get to see in these polls. So starting on that fabulous note, how do you know what your priorities are? And these are not only different for each one of us, but from day to day, it could be different for us individually. There's everything that I'm going to share, you already know. And for me as well, the way I approach this is every day I learn a little bit more. So what do I know now that I could have applied, 20 years ago, and my life would have been so much more smoother. But the fact is we have to go through trial and error and try what works best for us in terms of understanding our priorities. And that starts with, before we set our priorities, we understand them. And that really does start with understanding ourselves. So I think if we take some time, whether it's a bit of time every day or a consolidated time at some point, once a week, once a month, once a year, and just try to focus on what is important to us, what are our values, just to learn more about ourselves, because we, in the rigmarole of life and in how we rush through our days, we don't pause and we say, okay, we're just doing things, we're checking off things we need to do, as opposed to what is important to me, what adds to my quality of life, what brings me value. And you notice I'm saying me because we all, again, when we do this sort of inventory, we talk a lot about, or we think a lot about, what am I doing for my family? What am I doing for my work? What am I doing for my team? Sometimes we to be able to give the best of ourselves, we need to first align with ourselves. So I would say the first step with deciding what the priorities are is to get to know yourself. Consistently have this inventory, this check-in with yourself. What are your values? What makes a difference to your life? And how do you better your own quality of life? This isn't my word, but I read this somewhere and it makes so much sense to me in terms of priorities. Is like the secret is not to and I'm quoting, the secret is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. Let's take that in for a moment. Not prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. I think we all know when we have a plan, we get things done, or we're better in getting things done when we have a plan. So I would recommend, in terms of practical usage, we've talked about the existential, right? Think about what our values are, what is important to us, but practically, at the end of every day, at the beginning of every, or at the beginning, or both, maybe have a quick assessment of tasks you have to do that will align towards contributing towards your value of life, towards you feeling that you've accomplished something. It always works for me to get a few things done right away. So quick few important, maybe important or not so important, but it always works for me personally to have this feeling of accomplishment early on in the day, to have achieved a few things. So perhaps that's something that I can share with you, and maybe that's something that's going to help. Get a few things out of your way that call, make the appointment with the doctor, have your agenda for your team meeting done, like whatever those quick things are, get them done. And you know what? You're already on your way towards accomplishing some of your priorities for the day. The other thing that works for me, not all the time, but I try, is try to get things that are unpleasant or things you're not really looking forward to, try to get those done. I'm sure we can all relate to this, like, oh, I don't know, I was charged for something on my credit card that I didn't, and I need to call who wants to call any of those 800 numbers that you need to call and get things sorted out, right? Like, it's going to be a problem, or you're going to be on the phone for a long time, so you're going to keep procrastinating. So that's my other tip, which I'm giving that tip to myself as much, because I'm not very great at it, but I try. At least I know, I acknowledge that I procrastinate things that I don't find pleasant to do, whether it's an uncomfortable conversation, whatever that is, get it done, or at least try. And finally, I would say, yes, everything is important, but always when you feel overwhelmed, and as we all have, there have been blurred lines between our work life and our family life in the last few years, especially, pause, breathe, take that time to say what's really important. There's a definition, I'm sure, of priority somewhere, but I would say the simple thing is what's important to you and what makes a difference in your life and to those who you care about. So sometimes when everything is as overwhelming as we've all gone through the last few years, just pause, breathe. Easier said than done. I know, I struggle with it too, but just just take that time for yourself. So that's my little take on how to define your priorities, Hudson, and how and hopefully that helps all our audience today.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I definitely agree with, like, sometimes I remember when I was little, like I remember just my mom would give me like my vegetables and then like my chicken nuggets, right? And I will always, finish the vegetable first so I can really, enjoy, the pleasanter things later on. And I definitely agree with you on finding like your value, like what works for you is truly important when, identifying your priorities. So definitely, I totally agree with you on that one. And the next question I wanted to ask Melissa about is how should one schedule their time so they can get work done and still have a healthy personal life?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just gonna like preface by saying this, like I am one of those people that like uses a planner. I know it's not for everyone, but it works for me. I use a planner, I use the reminders on my phone, and I use the calendar on my phone. And like things like task managers, like all of that to schedule my time, to remind me about things that it maybe will slip my mind or like little details. My second favorite thing is my compressed schedule. I value that very highly. If you're new to government, if it's something that you're not necessarily aware of, this is something that is an option to many public servants where you could maybe work a little bit longer hours some days of the week, and then you can make it so that you have a day off every other week. Or perhaps the way I like to do it is I work longer hours Monday through Thursday so that I can have Friday afternoons off, or have longer lunches. You can really play with the hours to make it work for you and the tasks that you have to complete in a day, the mandate that your team has. So I'd advise to really get familiar with your collective agreement. Like even if you don't have one, become familiar with your leave provisions. How much vacation do you have? Do you have sick time, family or other? In the public service, we have many types of leave at our disposal that other industries don't necessarily have. This is part of your compensation package. So when you don't take your leave, think of it as leaving part of your salary on the table. People tend to think that I don't want to take vacation time because I'm not going anywhere. But really, scheduling your vacation is just as important as, like she said, scheduling your priorities. So again, whatever works for you. Another note is that compressed is not for everyone, especially looking at the return to office. Compressed does involve working longer hours. So if you are someone that is going into the work site, do you already have a long commute? Is that going to factor in? Maybe working shorter hours is actually better instead of working the longer hours certain days and having days off. If you are someone that is neurodivergent and you need more breaks, whether if you're living with chronic illness, a disability, anything like that, that's also something to keep in mind is what within your schedule and your collective agreement is available to you to schedule time so that you can have that healthy personal life. And that should come first, right? Like it's not about resting so you can be more productive. It's about resting because you deserve it. The final thing I'll say about that is that sometimes you also have access to leave without pay, which may sound scary, but sometimes it can be done through leave with income averaging. So you could average out your income so that you can take a month off to travel, rest, work on a hobby of yours, or visit friends and family, whatever you feel like doing. And there's also things like education leave. So if you're looking to better yourself, to study a passion, whatever the case, you can come back to work when you're done. Your position is potentially secured through things like that. So that's what I would recommend for scheduling your time to make sure you're balancing not just what you're doing in the workplace, but also prioritizing you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, like something that I wasn't aware of is the collective agreements and the conversations you can have with your leadership figures, right? Figure out what's available to you. Like I personally, I didn't know that you could, work an extra hour every day and then have Friday off every once a couple of weeks, right? I think that's also a good way to balance your priorities and also have a healthy personal life. Yeah. So the next question I want to ask Aditya about is, we all know that life happens, right? You're going to have to deal with conflicting timelines and deadlines. So Savita, how would you handle conflicting priorities?
I think my new mantra is what Melissa just said about take the time off because you deserve it, thinking about like, yeah, definitely I'm worth it. And when we're talking about conflicting priorities, that's probably because you have got so much on the go, right? And everything needs to be done right now. we all face that. That is not going to go away, especially again, as we're just so blended in our lifestyles these days. And also as just life, so for some reason, for all of us, just seems to get more complicated as time goes by. So we're all in this situation. We're all dealing with it every day. And while it sounds counterproductive, I think, again, to deal with conflicting priorities, the first step would be just to take a step back, just to have that pause again, and just to refocus and realign what's more important. What out of what is going to add value. Again, when you define the importance or what needs to get done first, what are the ones that are going to so ask those questions. What do I need to get done today? Maybe the question is also, what is the easiest one or the quickest one to get done? Because sometimes, as you know, that helps with accomplishing things and just making you feel, you get into the the inertia of motion. Like you get into the flow of things when you start getting things done. So for conflicting priorities, pause, take a step back, realign, you get into that focus again in terms of what's important, define that, try to accomplish things that are important and or can be accomplished soon. And three sort of things that I always try to keep in my mind is, one, have like a strategy, have a plan. Am I going to do this by noon? I'm going to only answer emails for these pockets of windows a day, because that is not going to stop. The zero inbox is a dream that I sometimes dream, but doesn't happen in reality, right? So first, have a strategy, have a plan. The planner works for Melissa, maybe post-it notes works for you. Maybe alarms on my phone work for me. So we all have different ways to get that going, but have a plan. That's number one, I would say. Two, what has really helped me in defining these conflicting priorities is to be decisive. And again, when you have so many things on the go and everything needs to be done, it can be difficult to make those choices. But not making a choice or not being decisive is actually probably going to, in the long run, be more detrimental. So be decisive. You don't need to aim for perfection. We all try to, we're all under so much scanner, right? Like such little margin for errors or the desire to do your best work or present a flawless piece or report or whatever your line of work is. But again, being decisive and understanding that there is always room for improvement, there always will be, is one way to move past and try to sort out those conflicting priorities. And finally, ask the question. You have so much going on, you have only so much time. Ask the question to your supervisor. What's most important? What do you think? How would you rank the tasks that I need to get done and important? Like, what do I need to get back to you today? They would help. We often get asked the question like, okay, I have so many things on the go. Maybe there are others who don't, and they can help with sharing, or maybe others have more and you can help. So it's a team environment. Don't think you're alone, and always ask the question of your supervisor, of your colleagues, however your team is set up. And this is at work, but even personally, right? Like there are things that I do, there are things my husband does, but there are times when I'm really frazzled and I have to say, hey, can you do this for me today or this week, or I'll have the same. He'll ask me. I ask my kids, they're quite grown now, and hey, mom's too busy, can you do the grocery run? So ask for help. Let's not try to be the what is it, the be all end all of things. Be a hero. That's right. You know what, Hudson, that is such an important point. It's nice to be a hero, but again, it's better to have a peaceful life. So in trying to scheduling and managing conflicting priorities, ask yourself these questions and have a plan. Every day is going to look a little bit different with this, and the goal is to just remember, keep the peace. Nothing is worth, I'm sure whatever priorities you have going on is not worth your peace of mind. So have the calm, have the peace, and ask for help when you need it.
Yeah,
so
for
that's
sure.
all I would say.
I definitely agree with you on like communicating. You only have 24 hours a day, right? Like you cannot try to do everything yourself, right? Like asking for help it is not something that, people should be ashamed of, right? It's we should understand each other. Everybody have, conflicting priorities, and I think helping, being able to communicate your status or situation is definitely a method, to handling conflicting priorities. So the next question, also the last preset question I want to ask Melissa about is, how would you reset when you notice yourself going out of balance?
Yeah, and this can mean a lot of things, whether it's out of balance with your mental well-being or out of balance where like, you're maybe working too much on one file and another, like Hudson mentioned. I'm both the co-chair for my branch's diversity and inclusion network, but I also have like what I call like my day job, like doing service design. So the number one thing I'll say is to advocate for yourself. You are your best advocate. Like Sudipta said, get to know yourself, ask for what you need, even when it's tough. I was having a conversation with a colleague just yesterday, actually, about like self-advocacy and how saying no is also saying yes. So saying no to certain priorities that maybe, like Sudipta said, maybe you can delegate, maybe someone can help you with that. I can't take this task on right now is saying yes to yourself and to your balance, to your rest. And you can keep an eye out on your triggers or red flags, right? Like before you get, let's say, out of balance, like, are you noticing that maybe you're more irritable or tired than usual? Is your sleep impacted? Is your appetite impacted? Um, this is tough again as well, specifically for like neurodivergent folks, where like we may not realize like when our body is giving us certain signals of like we're tired until it's too late and now we're exhausted, right? So just try to keep in touch with yourself, whether it's like through mindfulness, therapy, coping mechanisms, like whatever helps you get through your day, like really get to know yourself and like your needs, again, in the workplace and personally. Also, I would recommend to check your expectations and give yourself self-compassion. So sometimes it's easier to advocate for other people, extend grace to others, if somebody missed a deadline or something, than it is to do it for ourselves. But it's just as, if not more important, to do it for ourselves. And specifically, like how I reset when I notice I'm out of balance. So it depends, right? Like if I want to talk, I'll discuss it with someone I trust. That could be my husband, that could be a friend. If it's more serious, I'll book a therapy session and I'll become familiar, like I would say become familiar with what coverage you have with your benefits. If you can combine benefits, if you have a partner or something, right? Like typically it's about 80%, but you want to be familiar with like it won't necessarily cover everything. I know mental health is front of mind for a lot of us. We don't have the coverage that we wish we had to maybe go once a week and things like that. But that doesn't mean that you can't still access those services. And again, sometimes we don't want to talk. Sometimes we just want to be alone. And, we've seen it on TV. Sometimes people use what they call floor time. You literally just lie on the floor and have no sensory input. And sometimes that will help you reset. It could be sitting in your favorite chair, whatever the case, right? There is no one way to reset. And I really want you to remember this: rest is not earned. You are worthy of rest. You are worthy of joy. So find your balance and find what works for you.
Yeah, for sure. Like a lot of like good points to say. I noticed the Federal Youth Network has put some resources in the chat, where you can check out, maybe there's some good information on there. You can help yourself to redirect yourself on the good path when you notice yourself going out of balance. So now we have a couple of minutes left. We're going to take some time to answer some questions from the audience in the Q&A chat. So Melissa and Sabrita, feel free to just jump in and provide your opinions. I see there are a lot of good questions here. I'm just going to pick the first one. This person said, I can leave my work at the door physically, but mentally, I have a hard time not stressing about work in the evening. Any tips for that?
Melissa, did you want to take it on, or?
Yeah, sure. I can jump in. I have a pretty hard time with that actually, especially with like it could be rumination, it could be like, it's time for bed. This is embarrassing, but I call it nighttime energy. Like my brain will just start flying with ideas and sometimes it's work related. So really something that you can do, if talking about it with like a friend doesn't help, like honestly, sometimes escape will help. So whether it's reading a book, watching your favorite comedy show, watching a movie, or even honestly, like just scrolling through a few reels or something just to distract yourself so that you're not thinking about that. because I know sometimes the advice to like close your eyes and just not thinking about it, sometimes it'll actually make you concentrate on it more. So I find that like giving your brain something else to do. So, you know, like whether that's listening to music, giving just a different input so that you can disconnect from work. And also setting priorities. It's been very helpful for me personally when friends will tell me, you know, I don't read like articles related to work after work hours. So like even if I'm, let's say, scrolling Twitter and I'll see something interesting about like design, I may send it with a note like, you know, read this tomorrow, or like I'll share this with you at work, and also respecting like others' boundaries that way. But yeah, I find like honestly, sometimes distraction is just like the easiest. But Sudipta, I don't know. What about you?
For me,
Reels. Sorry. I meant like Instagram reels or like TikToks. Sorry. Just like little videos, even YouTube.
and that's
So,
good to
so
explain
you
because
wanted to,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll chime in very quickly because for
Yeah.
me, I think a lot of us who have this hybrid work environment, or we all were working, you know, remotely from home, you know, struggled a lot with that. For me, it's a simple thing, as in getting into my PJs and washing off all the makeup. It's like
Yeah.
a physical thing that I do that it wasn't always like that, but I had to find this for myself that, okay, once I take off all the makeup and get into my PJs, I'm zoned into my other life, which is probably the more important part of all our life, which is, you know, our homes, our families, our interests, our hobbies, our families in different orders every day. But for me, that works. Not every day, but I try.
Yeah. Routine is good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
for sure. We have just 4 minutes left. I want to just take one more question. So perhaps both of you, both our panelists can quickly provide your responses. So this person said, I have too much to do to stop working at 7.5 hours. So how can I reduce my workload when we're always short-staffed?
Yeah. Sudipta, you want to go first?
Absolutely. So, and I learned this for myself once I had my children, and I call them children or kids. They're 18 and 20. So I've had some 20 years of experience trying to juggle this bit because it became very intense. You know, early it was just all about me, and now I have all of these other things that I need to take care of in the 24 hours, which, you know, you've got the 7.5 for the work and then everything else. And sometimes they bleed into each other as well, right? Depending on your day. My response would be, I don't know. When you find out the answer to that, I want to know, because I don't know if there's an answer to that. So like Melissa said, show yourself grace, do what you can, prioritize the best you can in a way that aligns with your values. I think when you do that, you feel more fulfilled. And once you do that, you'll also see that you're accomplishing a lot more, because, you know, happy, fulfilled people actually will. This is not me. Lots of studies will point to this direction. That, you know, you heard of this too, right? Like when you want something done, give it to the busiest person you know. It's this momentum that you get into. So but that happens when you're accomplishing things that align with your values. So I'll stop with that, but that's something I would say, just keep the focus on your values and align your priorities with that, and don't be hard on yourself.
Yeah, and I can quickly respond to, I know we have like 2 minutes. I think it's really important to have the support of your leadership and even your senior leadership when this happens, especially when you're short-staffed, or if like you happen to be on a team with a revolving door. It's really important, like I mentioned, advocate for yourself, but encourage others to do the same. So hopefully, you know, you have your, whether it's your manager, your team lead, your director on board to push back on files, right? Like if you have a full plate, reevaluate, like what priorities can we move, what can maybe be on pause for a little bit, and then we can come back to it later, especially when you're short staffed. So again, really have grace for yourself, advocate for yourself, and encourage others to do the same.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We're just about to wrap up on our time. I just want to thank Sudipta and Melissa for being our gracious guests today. Certainly, you know, a lot of good wisdom and knowledge has been shared, and hopefully offered you a bit of more insight on how you can manage, identify, or attend to your priorities in the future. That being said, if you want to learn more about the topic or any other relevant information, please visit the Career Bootcamp 2023 Weekly Research page. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back to Haley from Federal Youth.
Thank you, Hudson, and thank you, Melissa and Sudipta. That was amazing. Before we finish, we do have a really quick poll for you all. The answers won't be shared. It's just for our own purposes. Was this session a good use of your time? Yes, no, or I don't know. Thank you so much for joining us today. In addition to this session, we'll be discussing managing relationships with your manager at 1 p.m. and an Ask Me Anything panel discussion at 2:30, where you can ask some of the speakers from the last 2 weeks all those questions that you didn't get a chance to have answered. There's also an opportunity to network from 4 till 5 p.m. today on WonderMe. We will have some of the speakers attending that, so make sure that you join, and it's another opportunity to ask some of those questions. The link to all the sessions, as well as the networking event, can be found on the VExpo. All of the resources will be available on the wiki page, and the recording of this event will be available on your YouTube channel. Thank you so much and have a great day.